here are gonna hopefully we'll get to share the recording with them. But yeah, we're gonna get started so that we make sure, hey Phil, we're gonna make sure we end at 7. You know, the structure of this is gonna be a little bit of presentation, and then we're hoping to reserve most of the time for just questions, and then we'll try to sort of talk through things. And so if you want to add a question in the chat, even kind of as we're talking through stuff, you're welcome to do that. We're going to try to keep an eye on questions that come through the chat, and we will, you know, prioritize. We'll try to hit those as we get to the Q&A. We're also going to open it up, and you can just unmute yourself and actually just speak your question in real time, which is always like a wonderful gift to those of us presenting. Doesn't feel like you're speaking into the void of Zoom silence or something. So, so y'all know me, I'm Adam Wilson, head of school at Griffin. And the two other people that are gonna be really highlighted in this session today are Kristof Irwin, who I think is here. Are you here,
yeah.
Kristof? Oh. Maybe not. Kristof's not here yet? Okay.
He's
Carolyn's
here. He's
here.
here.
He is.
He's there.
Or,
yeah. He's at the.
Say hello, Kristof.
Hello, Adam.
Oh, hi, Kristof. There you are. Okay. I got multiple gallery, and in gallery view, I got multiple screens. So there, yeah. Well, Kristof is going to be talking a little bit later. Talking in a bit. We're like so fortunate to have him in our community this year. And he has been super generous with me in just providing consultation about healthy air quality in our school. He's really a renowned expert on that topic. And he and his wife, Diane, run a company called Positive Energy here in Austin. And he works with engineers and architects and people who run businesses and facilities, and guides them through all the various issues of healthy air. Somehow I got muted. Can you hear me again? Okay. I don't know how far I got in my introduction of Kristof, but let me just start again. Kristof will be sharing a little bit about.
Why don't I just do the intro in my talk, Adam?
Okay, well, I'm going to just give you some accolades, and then you can introduce yourself here. I'm just grateful for you, Kristof, for being, you know, willing to support us at Griffin. Kristof has a daughter who is a new sophomore at Griffin School. Her name is Ming, and we're really delighted to have Ming and Kristof and Diane in the community. And this year, Kristof has just been an invaluable support to me as we look through how to focus on healthy air quality. So he'll be talking more about that. Wendy Salome is the other person who will be talking, and she is our board president. She's been on the board for a few years now. I don't even remember how long. Wendy has 2 students at Griffin. Emmy is a senior, and Khalil is a freshman. And many of you know Wendy because she's really active and involved in the community and has been super supportive of the staff and faculty and just all the community building efforts we've had. So Wendy and I, Wendy as our board president and I as head of school decided we would be a 2-person COVID committee. And I just want to acknowledge that a lot of schools have decided to set up, you know, 12-person COVID committees. And we thought, all right, we're going to be lean and mean, and it's just going to be the 2 of us. And then we're going to take advantage of people like Kristof in the community who can be a support to us as we go forward. But Wendy's been hugely active in helping build the plan and the protocols and all of that. So let me just pass it right on to you, Wendy, to sort of give some updates from the board perspective and from your perspective on our work with COVID.
That sounds great. Thanks, Adam. I think, you know, it's interesting for Adam and I both wearing all the different hats of being a parent and a, you know, board person and kind of responsible for everyone, you know, in the sense of how safe our protocols are. And I've been really happy with how the school year has progressed so far. And I feel really reassured that the things that we're doing are working well, and the things that weren't working, we were able to adapt to really quickly and make changes. I think that, I don't know for everyone else, but even in my own house, there's been a weird disconnect between, the news and the national media, because COVID is really escalating nationwide, and kind of what has been happening in Austin. I feel like we're just now starting to catch up, even to the point that my own son was like, "Are you sending me to school on Monday?" And I said, "Well, let's look at the recommendations from the Austin Public Health together and, talk through it." But mostly I want to reassure everyone that Adam and I have been like doing deep dives on Mark Escott's recommendations and Austin Public Health, and just following along. And so we're highly aware that Austin is starting to creep back up, and it sounds like soon. Right now we're in stage 3, and in stage 3 in Austin, that matches with what we're doing right now. You're allowed a 50% capacity at school. That's what we've been doing. It sounds like we'll be bumping up to stage 4, which is a more restrictive stage in Austin soon. And when that happens, that would technically take us back to phase 4 for us, which was 25% on campus. But given the timeline, I'm almost certain that we would just go straight to phase 5 and just finish out virtually if that call gets made. And so that's what we're watching. And, as soon as we know, you all will know as well. But if Austin moves to a more restrictive stage, then we also will move to a more restrictive stage.
Can I just jump in and clarify,
Yeah.
Wendy? So, and when Wendy says finish out, we're talking about finishing out the calendar year, finishing out the fall semester.
Yeah.
And obviously, come January, we'll be doing the same analysis of what's feasible and safe to do then. But yeah.
Yeah, just between, it's such a short little 3 weeks, I think, between the end of Thanksgiving break, and then also, realistically knowing what's coming for Thanksgiving break. And then, we have those 3 weeks. It would be really hard to fit everyone in to a 25% capacity. The other piece I wanted to add is that we recognize, I think consistently across the board, the feedback that we've had is that how valuable this time together has been for students. And so we're just going to keep creatively thinking outside of the box as to how we can find little ways to maintain those connections safely within the guidelines that are allowed with Austin Public Health, to have some small doses of connection that might not look like a whole 9th grade or 10th grade class coming onto campus at the, all at the same time. So we're definitely keeping that in mind. And then the last thing I just wanted to say is that I feel really, I guess I just feel really proud of our community. We have done really well. We have been really fortunate to not have an outbreak. And I actually think it's not only being fortunate, but also planning well and following all of our protocols. And I just think of all the things that we do as layers of protection. So we're not just doing one thing. We're not just only wearing masks or only social distancing. We've really worked really hard to make all of these layers of protection to minimize our risk as much as possible. And we're going to keep doing that as we move forward. I think that's it, Adam.
Okay, thanks, Wendy. Yeah, and we're going to pass it on to you, Kristof, to just give a little bit of overview about the work you do and about the work you've been doing with us at Griffin.
Okay, great. I'm going to share my screen here. I would just like to, before we get started, just to thank you, Adam, and all the people you've been relying on. Like all the parents, we have peers and siblings, cousins, family that are dealing with the same thing. And you guys are head and shoulders taking better care of our kids, I think, than a lot of the schools. We're just so lucky. We're just so grateful and so lucky.
Thanks, Kristof.
So, let's see. Haha, yeah, back at you. Now I praised you. Okay, so do you guys see a screen that says indoor spaces, IAQ, and COVID?
Yes.
Yeah, we do.
Great.
Yep.
So I'm going to set the stage by just talking about indoor spaces and indoor air quality as a context for everyone to have maybe an informed perspective on COVID. Because frankly, what's old is new again. Like the principles of keeping you healthy indoors are not fundamentally different now that we have an airborne pathogen called the coronavirus. It's le plus ça change, le plus c'est même chose, right? The more that things change, the more they stay the same. Okay, so first we're going to start with some mathematical poetry here. This is a coronavirus virion. Those little spikes are the S proteins. I don't know if you know, but we're in the second genetic variant, and the one that we're dealing with now has more proteins. The first one is kind of come and went in North America, and the second one is carrying on. It's a little more virulent, but the same treatments, same genetic markers, testing, it all applies. So that is a variant. It's about 100 nanometers, incredibly small. It's about a thousand times smaller than the diameter of a human hair. This is a average adult male, about 1.7 meters, 10 million, roughly 10 million. Actually, we're 17 million times bigger than them. Yeah, I'm saying that right, 17 million times bigger. So the question is for us today, what is it that is 10 million times bigger than us, right? Is it the Pacific Ocean? You know, is it West Texas, something phenomenally large, right? It's the planet, right? So we to the planet are the coronavirus to us, right? And I really just bring this up to get us to really think about, like, if we want to think about the ongoing, you know, the crisis in sustainability and the way we're treating our planet, very small things can have disproportionate outcomes. So that is the math. We are actually 7 million times smaller than the planet, so not quite the same. So Positive Energy is basically a public advocacy company in the guise of an engineering company. We do a lot of, that's my dog, he's here at the office with me. We are very clear, I should say it this way. I have a background in research and development in high energy physics and science. Then I became a custom residential builder for 15 years, kind of bringing that, like, well, what does this do? I'm building a house. What does this do? And homes are absolutely very, very influential for societal and personal well-being. And that's what we try to achieve. So we do sustainability, high performance enclosures and mechanical systems, resilient systems, so solar and water systems, and then a lot of consulting when it goes wrong. We can also go into your homes and do testing and verify things like that. We are kind of like the anchor man in the local community. When everyone else is stumped, they come to us. I'll leave it at that. Oh, that's embarrassing. So, oops. This is a bedroom. You would call this inside your house, right? So let's just remember that we're talking about the indoor air quality, and then COVID. And I'll go fast through the first part and dwell on COVID. So think words like inside, indoors, right? In the house, right? Look around you. Are you really in the house, right? The house is made of the floor, walls, ceiling. You're not in any of those. Where we really spend our lives is not in the house, but we have much more of a fishbowl strategy, and we actually spend our lives we live our lives in the air contained by our house, right? So that's a different scenario. The average home in America at this point has about 2,000 pounds of air in it and 3-4 gallons of water vapor suspended in that air. So this fishbowl strategy is really quite accurate. We are kind of swimming our days through the bedrooms and such, living room. And if you did have a fish tank, you'll know that you constantly bubble oxygen in there for ventilation, and you constantly filter the water. Neither of those things happens routinely in our homes currently. So there's some upside potential there. They are happening in your school, so you can relax. There was some study done in the early 2000s, National Human Activity Pattern Study done by the environmental epidemiology community. And this is where you get that classic, 90% of our lives inside homes, inside buildings, 70% inside your home. So this is a rather dark slide. I'm going to move from it quickly, but we do spend most of our time indoors. The vast majority of our time indoors is spent in our homes. And that data was pre-COVID. So what that means is, 12 to 16 times a minute right now, you're filling your lungs, emptying your lungs. That is happening 24/7, 365. We can go without water. We can go without food. We can barely go without air. So very much so that anyone that cares about healthy food would be very interested in healthy air. Air is our dominant environmental intake by mass, 10 times food every day. This is where air begins and you end, or you begin and air ends, right? These are the deep alveolar sacs in our lungs. It's kind of like a stalk of broccoli and the little balls at the very end of the broccoli. If you took all those alveolar sacs, right, the air comes in and diffuses into your blood. So remember, air is mass. So the mass enters whatever's in that air mass, you know, depending on the size, it'll diffuse into your blood. If you took all those alveolar sacs and unwrapped them, half of a tennis court, including the doubles lines, right? That is large, about 70 square meters of surface area. There's 480 of these little balls, 24 splittings as they go down. So 24/7, 365, you're ending up breathing about 40 pounds of air a day, right? So when we hear, oh my gosh, coronavirus can affect us so strongly, it's for good reason. We're really taking in what's around us deep into our body, into our blood, into every cell and tissue. So switching gears a little bit, let's talk about us. All right, so we are microbial symbiots. You know, what we call a human being is actually, if you were going to, you know, evaluate it by DNA, there's more microbial DNA in each one of us than human DNA. Like what's eating your lunch or your dinner, it's not you, you know, it's your microbes. And I could have gotten some really cool pictures, like every inch of our body, like this could be the savanna and back here is the swamp and this is the grassland, literally different microbiomes across our and inside our human body. So our human, thank you for rattling your collar. Our human microbiome is in constant, like an ecological cycle, in constant communication with the indoor microbiome, right? So the indoor microbiome is not what we think it is. It's not just mold. The indoor microbiome, the volume knob, and it's very important to say this in Austin, Texas, is humidity. So to the extent you control humidity in your home, you control health in your home. And you need to control it separately from controlling space temperature for the most part. But people are very interested in mold. There's a little human-centric aspect to that. And fundamentally, it's because mold, you can see it and you can smell it. But it is considered to be, by the indoor air quality community, it's around 30-35% of your health impact in an indoor space. When you have a moldy home or something like that, you also have a rich population in many other microbial species. So it's really damp building microecology that we're reacting with. Remember, I'm setting the stage. We're getting to COVID, I promise. So we live in the atmosphere. We're like lobsters scuttling around at the bottom of the sea, right? Like we have trillions of tons of air above us, and it's literally gases held here by gravity. And in a kind of another beautiful poetry, physical poetry, the oxygen we breathe has been exhaled by trillions of microbes over countless millennia, right? So we've always been a microbial planet, and, you know, microbial symbiots that we are, this hasn't changed. So we have the air that we started with, plus modified by microbes and human activity very strongly since the Industrial Revolution. And there's two main themes to this fluid that we live our lives immersed in. And air is a fluid. It's a compressible fluid, but, you know, according to physics, it is absolutely a fluid. So the two main themes are ours is a microbial world. That's what we're going to expand today. And that we are living in the chemical age. That is another very important theme that's maybe for another time. We have podcasts out if you want to hear more. But basically in the United States, we are the guinea pigs. We are having these experiments done on us. Other countries don't allow many of the things we do in our air. So when it comes to air, you can suspend things in air, and you can suspend liquid and solid particles. And when you do that, it's considered to be an aerosol. So it's a solution, right? So like milk is a solution. The fatty solids don't fall out. It's like salt in water. It's a solution. It's not going to fall out. In a very similar way, please stop, Dickie Bear. Of course, he's going to do that during this. So, but this is informal. We can relax. So what happens is these particles are various sizes, and I'll just tell you now that the ones you can see are not the ones that are the problem. Our body's natural defenses, we have this mucocilia elevator where we're constantly bringing up what we breathed in, and it goes down into our stomachs and, you know, hopefully dissolves or gets pooped out. But it is the ones we can't see. We'll talk a little bit more about this. So air quality science splits it into these three groups: coarse, fine, and ultrafine. and that's PM10. A little bit of math here. PM10 is 10 micrometers and smaller. A hair is on the order of 100 micrometers. So a tenth of a hair and smaller are considered coarse particles. You go down to 2.5 micrometers and smaller, and now they're called fine particles. That's a very important number. That's reported in Ozone Action Days on the news. Those are the ones that go deep into those alveolar sacs and can actually cross the blood-air barrier. Parts of them, they can diffuse some gases in. And then we have ultrafine particles, also known as nanoparticles or UFPs. Those are 0.1 micron. So now one last subtlety here. The 10 microns are 10 and smaller. So it includes the 2.5 microns. The 2.5 microns are 2.5 and smaller. So it includes the 0.1. So when we say, oh my gosh, coarse particles back in the early 1900s have all these impacts, what we're finding out now as we get more and more sophisticated understanding is that really it's the smaller particles. And unfortunately, we report air quality by weight, which they weigh almost nothing. So when it comes to COVID, we have some new terms now. We have large droplets, we have droplet nuclei, and then we have the coronavirus itself, which is usually riding on some very small particles. But large droplets in that same PM, there is no such thing as PM 100, but that's where they are. It's kind of the squirt gun model, right? As I'm talking right now, if I increase my volume, I'm putting out more particles, and they're going to fall to the floor in a few seconds. And I mean like 1 to 20 seconds. Those things are hitting the floor. They will quickly evaporate too. They will sit on the floor, they will evaporate. Then they can be resuspended. And now they're PM10 or PM2.5. Now they can stay in the air minutes to hours or indefinitely if they're small enough, right? This is a very important distinction, right? We're not dealing with squirt guns. This is where the WHO and the CDC have had trouble getting past. We're dealing with aerosols, bioaerosols, droplet nuclei, so they can stay in the air a long time. Some of that's illustrated on here, and there's a lot of cool stuff here, but I'm not going to show it to you. Just look on the bottom right. The red line says handled by body's natural filter. You see that? Right above it, visible to eyes. And then on the very top level, those are microns again. So we were just talking 10 and then 2.5, which is a little bigger than 1, and then 0.1. So these things are not visible to the eyes. They are in the microscope to electron microscope range. And then back to the bottom, handled by body's natural filter. And then on the left, most negative health effects, right? So this presumption that we can experience accurately our environment from an air quality perspective is a fiction. We cannot engage with this. We can't smell it. We can't see it. We can't taste it, but it's real. To make it real, I have a couple of exciting quotes. This one is pretty old now. This one's from 2003. Pretty blunt. Indoor air quality is one of the top 5 most urgent environmental risks to public health, right? So this has been around for quite a while, this issue. Here's another one, PM 2.5 is in this. The overall evidence is consistent with a causal relationship between PM 2.5 exposure and cardiovascular morbidity and mortality. That means heart disease and heart death. Causal. I will be very emphatic and say the indoor air quality science community does not use the word causal lightly, right? We say correlated or associated, something like that. The good news is there's a lot you can do to make indoor air quality better, and it's fairly simple. These are the 5 principles. There's lots of resources out there. We've been speaking about this for quite a long time now. But fundamentally, it's start with a good enclosure. There's a lot to say about that. We've talked to Adam about that at the school. Minimize the indoor emissions of pollutants. That has something to do with masks and other things. In your home, it has to do tremendously with cooking and taking your shoes off at the door. And then we mentioned the 3 big ones that can be handled through proper design. Your air should remain dry. You should definitely bring in ventilation air. People think that the connection to nature they want in their home is that beautiful view. Oh, no. The connection to nature your body wants, not necessarily your ego, your body wants to breathe outdoor air. It is always better for you. Well, if you're on Interstate 35 or near a chemical plant or something, it's not. But generally speaking, we want outdoor air in our home. And then the last one is to filter. And we'll be talking plenty about filter. So now we're getting into COVID, right? So now with this as background, we're kind of ready to start talking about COVID. And there, just like in many areas of our culture, there's what we know, and then there's what we're willing to do and what we're willing to accept about what we know. And unfortunately, we are dealing with a long-seated, since the 1910, we have been believing that this guy, Charles Chapin, was a leading influencer early on in the indoor air quality movement. And he says, diseases are likely to be are not dust-borne, but they're spray-borne, 2 or 3 feet, a phenomena which resembles contact infection. So basically, they're saying that, when I'm talking to you, I can either touch you and give you a pathogen, or I can kind of throw something at you with my mouth. But that's it. So it's fomites or squirt guns, right? Fomite means surface contact, right? That's why we're putting all this triclosan on our hands these days, which, as you'll see, is like, really? So back in 1935, William Wells challenged this guy and said, oh, no, measles was airborne. It can be controlled with ultraviolet germicidal irradiation. The American Public Health Association, 10 years later, said the conclusive evidence is not available, that airborne transmission is the dominant mode. So in 1935, we basically had the answer given to us. It took several more years. It took until 1956, and this guy Riley, so notice Wells, Riley, we're going to be talking about that in a minute, but he proved the aerosol route in the VA hospital in Baltimore, and it has been proven ever since. So now we add to the disease transmission routes, touching something, the squirt gun model, and then aerosols, right? So if you want to understand an aerosol, just imagine vaping or smoking, campfires, right? And there's all kinds of different particles. Some of them fall to the floor, but you can walk into a room where maybe it doesn't look smoky to you, but you smell the smoke. What's happening there, right? You're experiencing the fact that there's particles that remain in the air, hours to minutes, minutes to hours to weeks to months to indefinitely from that. So we're actually still having trouble with this. This is a joke from 2007. Cough, you don't think the Center for Disease Control cough would let me fly if I were cough contagious. But we are, in fact, still experiencing that. I think a lot of us might have unheard that there's been some politicization of the CDC in the US, and the WHO was really stuck on this 6-foot range. So we'll talk about that coming up here. So the indoor air quality science community has basically been watching this train wreck from 1910 until now. And then the pandemic hits, and they're like, they're still thinking it's only when you touch and the squirt gun. And that's what they're saying on TV, right? Raise your hand if that's what you heard, right? Because that's what we all heard. So this guy and many, many, many peers opened up a spreadsheet for basically for public consumption. It's available freely. I'm happy to share the link. Adam's happy to share the link with you. It's not simple. It's not trivial to understand the things. It's very sensitive to certain inputs. So I would caution you, if you want to look at it, absolutely look at it. But it's an expanding body of knowledge to get into. There's not that many inputs. We'll talk about this now. So Wells and Riley basically have this fairly simple law, and it's one of many types of box models. So I work with architects, and they hate it when I say this, but from a very pragmatic level, no matter how gorgeous it is, your home is a box, right? There's the outside the box, and then there's the inside of the box, and you're inside the box. Well, actually, you're inside the mass of air contained by the box. But so let's start with the first things on the box. Boxes leak. We're not building a submarine or a space shuttle. So air can infiltrate in, air can exfiltrate out. So that's just a normal thing. You can control that. You can make them looser or tighter. Generally, tighter is much, much better. So into this box, we have, we're talking COVID now. So we have an infective person and a susceptible person. The infective person is releasing virions at a certain rate of emission. They're getting entrained in the air. They're staying in there, minutes to hours to indefinitely. And they lead to a certain concentration in the air based on how much is being emitted and how big the box is, right? Quick point here. How much is being emitted is incredibly variable by individual. And it is fairly, we're still learning as a race of beings, as a culture on the planet, a lot about COVID. But it is believed right now that 10 to 20% of individuals are contributing infection to 80 to 90% of the public, right? So a small subset of the people happen to be super emitters or super spreaders. And we can do things about that too. So you get X, you get this concentration X in the space. And then that concentration is decreased by the fact that there's some loss, right? These virus particles just die. That's what they do. So there's some decay from that. They fall to the floor. There's some resuspension, but basically some of them fall to the floor, and that's called deposition. And those are the main things that we can do. So we can control the inflow of uncontaminated air. That's ventilation. we can actually filter the air in the room and grab more of it. That's very similar to deposition. We can have it deposition itself on our filters. I told Adam this, I want to tell you this at home. Suddenly changing your air filter at home, which by the way is important to do. You want to wear gloves, you want to wear your mask, you want to take it right out of the filter chassis and put it in a plastic bag and tie it off. Because if it's where we're depositing all our potential virions, right, that is now a very contaminated surface. So we can do these various things. I'm going to show you the next graph. It's really sketchy. I don't want to talk about it, but we're going to see it very specifically. Those blue lines that's the Skagit County Choir. It was like 80% dangerous. And then they did all these measures. And then if you did all the measures at once, it goes down to 10%. And then if you go outdoors, that's the last line. You can't even see. It's like 0.5%, right? So always go outdoors. But look at that. You can go from like 80% likely they would catch it to 10% by doing a few things. The last thing is to try to, in a very quick way, to give you some confidence that aerosol transmission is real. Those gray lines are the Wells-Riley model for the Diamond Princess. That's the cruise ship that was having some serious challenges back in February. So they painstakingly modeled that ship, and they ran numerous simulations and then compared the modeled simulations to the reported cases. And you can see they track very well. And that's not quite right because this is the model results. I'll just say, this is the model results for the ones that did track reasonably well. So from that, they could start to say, aha, what made a difference and why? So, okay, so now for our school, right? So I ran the Wells-Riley model with help from Adam and some people, got measurements, looked at the engineering plans. And we can say that if you put 10 students in a classroom, and I assume 500 square feet, but it's not super sensitive to that, and they're wearing cloth masks. Cloth masks are 50% effective at capture of this PM 2.5, which is really the place of interest particle, and they're 30% effective on inhale, right? So one of the things we can do is we can recognize, well, you can do a lot better than 50-30. And that's a 4-layer cloth mask right there. So we establish a baseline probability of infection. And so because I know we're going to ask, I need to say a little bit of things about this. We, all of us, the global scientific community included, we are in learning mode. We are in data acquisition mode about COVID. So when we calculate a number and we say it's this likely, this is the baseline probability of infection, there are many things we don't know, but we're very confident in two things. We're very confident it's not 10 times bigger or 10 times smaller. That has decreased actually over time. But currently, we say we're about between 8 and 10 times, that's how accurate we are. But the second thing we say is that we're very confident that this model, if you want to compare relative cases, like whatever the baseline is, I take all my masks off. Now I know it's 3 times as likely, right, that I'll get exposed. Okay, put the masks back on and double the ventilation and filtration, which are equivalent, right? One is diluting the air through bringing it in. The other is reducing the concentration of the infectious particle by capturing it. But they're very equivalent. That's a big deal that ventilation and filtration are equivalent. Ventilation, you need to think ka-ching, 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 very expensive, very hard to do. Filtration, easier. But you ventilate and filter, you double that rate, half as likely, right? Wow, how exciting is that? Now go back, have the rate of ventilation, and everyone's wearing masks, but now they're wearing KN95s or N95s or the KF94s. The KF94s, by the way, anyone that wears glasses, Adam Wilson, you would love them because they don't steam up your glasses. They have a different shape. They have this kind of shelf shape, and your glasses. Anyway, minor point. So put on these glasses. They're rated, by the way, the 95, we use 3.3 micrometers as the rating size. So they are 95% effective in the laboratory at the 0.3 micrometer size, right? That's where the 95 comes from. The N just means it's not used for oils or solvents. It's for normal use. When you put them on the people in the public, right, the 95% decreases. So I put this on hastily and I run into the HEB, right? And I might have some gaps and leaks. So we conservatively used 80-80. As soon as you put 80-80 masks on instead of 50-30, 1/3 as likely to get that. Now, Now go back to the base case, increase the filtration ventilation, which we have done in your classrooms, and put on N95 masks. Now you are 1/10 as likely compared to the base case. And the base case changes all the time. The number changes because it is proportional to what? The prevalence of this disease in our community, which is ramping up and going down. Currently, as of 2 days ago, the base probability of infection for that 10 students, 500 square feet, 50-30 masks was 0.12%, right? So, 0.98%, 0.12 people in the classroom. So not even a full person. So we're not dealing with large likelihoods, but it's such a, we don't want it. So even any likelihood is small. So a little bit more about masks and filters and we're done. So I mentioned this already. So 80-80 and 50-30, and the 95 just means 95% effective at 0.3 microns. And by the way, I'm happy to share these slides. These are filter curves. So you have efficiency along the vertical axis and particle size. And you notice they all have this unfortunate dip. That dip is right at 0.3 microns. So you notice like MERV16 is on the order of 70-80%. HEPA filters, these are what's in our classrooms. Again, you have efficiency on the left and particle size. You can see the 0.3 is halfway up. That's where it's rated. It's not the most penetrating size always, but it's generally close to it. But look at that left axis. That is not now 190-80. That is 199.98, 99.96. So that design point at 0.3 microns has to be at least 99.97 effective. So you're really trapping a lot of particles. There's a lot to say about that, but I'm going to end there and open it up for Q&A and stop sharing. So I hope that wasn't too long. I tried to edit.
Okay, yeah, that was awesome. And then you all can see how, yes, you can see how we all get into learning mode when we're hanging out with Kristof. So yeah, questions. We've a lot to digest there, but you can also see why we kind of changed our mask strategy recently, and we're now like looking for kind of some community buy-in around all adopting like better masks, and then working on making sure they fit our faces well, and we've done what we can to wear them properly. So I think, yeah, y'all have a good sense. So if you have a question, why don't you raise your virtual hand in Zoom, and we will try to we'll see you a little bit better, because right now there's a lot of different windows open, and you'll come to the top of my list if you raise your Zoom hand, or you can just unmute and say hello.
Yes.
So I see a question in the chat. How would rapid testing reduce the baseline risk?
So Wendy, maybe you have more about that. I mean, I will tell you that we would just know sooner who's infected and be able to reduce the exposures. But fundamentally, our model is opaque to that. It's tracking the actual prevalence in our community. So it would make these numbers go down if the number went down. Please, Catherine, hi. I see you popped up.
And maybe I'll just comment on the question of rapid testing. We did, and I think I shared this. We did get our initial allocation of rapid tests. They're antigen tests from Abbott Lab. And I've gone through the process of, it's a pretty simple process of like a little training process for how to administer them, so we can administer them at the school. I should be able to start doing that at the beginning of next week. I've got to wait for to receive a little like a certification from the state. But those tests, I think, will be a useful tool for us. And as Kristof said, I think, to the extent that we can, see someone who has symptoms, and it could be allergies, it could be COVID, and it could be anything else, right? It'll give us at least, some direction about, it'll give us a sense of if we need to send that person to get a CPR test, or whether we can say, we can identify stuff a little bit quicker. So that'll be a useful tool. We don't have many of them, but we get an allocation. Once we've got 40 of them right now, and we have the opportunity to receive more if we use those up. We're thinking right now about the strategy for how we want to use them. And I think first and foremost, we'll use them with people, staff and students who have symptoms. And then there may be some other ways we use them, probably starting with staff, who may want to get tested. But we're also thinking about how to use them in the week after Thanksgiving, for instance, or some times like that. So still figuring that out. Okay, I see another question in the chat. If a person is exhibiting symptoms, shouldn't they be kept from coming on campus due to the survey in the morning? So Catherine, are you asking, should they not come to campus to get tested?
Yeah, I thought that was the whole purpose of this survey, is if you hit yes to any of that,
right,
then you don't go on campus. And if you want to come on campus, you go to your doctor and, be assisted by the medical community in lieu of coming on campus and exposing others.
Right. I mean, yeah, the part of the administration of these tests is you got to have a secure environment to do it, where you're not introducing potential, risk to the rest of the community. So we're still figuring that out. But just know that every school has a set of these tests, and that we're going to be all figuring that out together. I think generally this is going to be in the category of, someone is pretty sure they don't have COVID, but they have a symptom on that list. I mean, if someone has a fever, I think it's best for them to go get a PCR test. That's the gold standard test. If someone has, a symptom that's kind of normal for them, but it's still on that list, this is kind of where we might use that. And they think, oh, I just have, I get this periodically, that's where we might use this kind of thing as a tool. So let's see. Eileen, I see your question in the chat. Assuming we want to replace the 4 masks you guys provide for us, curious about sources. So I do know that that some links have been shared in the chat, and we can do that more. I also just want to let you know we're willing to keep replacing those masks for students and for staff who need them. And yeah, they're masks we expect will last for multiple uses, but certainly not forever. So, I don't know how many cycles we'll get through before the masks will start to degrade. And I do think the care of those masks is going to be important. And maybe Kristof, you can speak to this a little bit, but, the masks, as I understand it, have some electrostatic qualities that are part of what makes them effective. And then cleaning them in certain ways is going to undermine that. Do you want to kind of talk a little bit about that, Kristof?
Yeah, so I mentioned it briefly that the N is basically, it doesn't mean normal, but it's a rating that means it's not in a solvent environment and it's not in an oily environment. Both of those things degrade the charge. Let's see. So what you really want to avoid, how we're all spraying the alcohol on our hands and rubbing it. You do not want that alcohol to touch your mask, right? That would be very bad. The mask is made out of basically filaments of thin charged films. And that is how we get, remember those dips in the filter curve? How did you get that dip to come up? You used electrostatic attraction of the particles. So as long as the electrostatic charge is strong, the mask is okay. You can heat them up. That is questionable. I would prefer that you just wait the 72 hours that the virion is expected to die in. So kind of have a 72-hour rotation or longer, right? But if you had 1 mask for each day of the week, by the time you got back to your Tuesday mask, you're good to go. If you do something like travel in an airplane, at the end of that trip, that mask is gone, right? You throw that mask away. Because remember, you're inhaling and the mask is stopping it. And that means the virions are in the fabric. And if you're in a very crowded airport and you don't know, right? There could be the people around you, nobody is spreading it. It could be they're all super spreaders. So you might have a lot of stuff stopped in your mask. Keep in mind, they're up to 95% effective at trapping these small particles. So yeah, as far as the thing about getting bad sources of masks, I've heard about that too. I'm not an expert at it. I would say a good, careful visual inspection, holding it up to bright light, making sure there's no obvious like seam tear or puncture or something like that. If you need to get to the place where you're not trusting that the actual, material is electrostatically charged, I can't help you with that. I would assume it is. I mean, these are commodities. They've predated COVID. They're easy to make. Okay, I'll stop there.
Yeah, I'll add two really quick things. One is, and then Kristof, you can let me know if this is poor advice, but I read that if the elastic comes unattached, which happened on one of my masks, like, and when I first put it on, that you can just put a dot of hot glue to reattach it, and that's a feasible way to,
Right, like, yes, just to tell you, if some of us have larger diameter heads and these little straps feel like they're trying to cut our ears off over time, you can just attach like a string to these and go around the back of your head, just string to string. You don't even need your ears, right? So you just need it nice and snug on your face. Snugging it up along the bridge of your nose, really important. I know that I saw that one of my daughter's masks, that metal band had snapped. So that mask, that should be gone, right? You shouldn't do that. And that is as much for you as other people, right? If as you exhale, you get a poof because it's not tight on your nose, then when you inhale, you get an unfiltered dose right into your mask. So cloth masks are mainly like, I'm outside, I might stand a few feet from someone and see them, and I'll put this cloth mask on as a gesture or something. And it will have some impact. And as soon as you go indoors, wherever you're indoors with other people, I mean, not at your homes, you're going to put on a good mask. It's that simple, and it's going to be some expense over time, and it's not great for environmental sustainability, but it is the right advice right now.
I'll share one other quick comment about masks. That Whitney, the person who loves animals the most in our community is Whitney, and many of you have adopted dogs from her. And she shared with Caroline and I an article that just talked about how important it is to snip off the elastic bands from masks when you throw them away, because in the landfill and in the world, they will get tangled in wildlife and cause problems. So I'll just throw that out there because I know I was really appreciative of her for sharing that.
I'll start passing that along too. Thanks, Adam. Could I talk about face shields, or are we going in order?
Please go for it, Kristof. Mm-hmm.
So each one of us is like a candle, right? You're hotter than your environment almost all the time. That means there's this plume around you, right? And that means anything near you is getting drawn into the plume and shooting up. So you need to think about that as you walk through a space, or if a kid sneezes near you, you can bet you that just went right up to your face. Now imagine you put a face shield on, and any emissions that are lower than you get entrained in this plume. They measure higher concentrations behind the face shield. So a face shield with a mask, wait, let me just back up. A face shield is about the squirt gun, right? It's about the large droplet that's gonna hit you in the eye, go up your nostril, land on your lip, right? That's what the face shield is about. It has no, obviously, if you went into a room and someone was vaping and you didn't want to breathe cigarette smoke, you would not put on a face shield. So the face shield, you need to make sure that you're not saying, oh, I have a face shield that's partially as good as a mask. It has nothing to do with aerosol transmission, except kind of negatively keeping it to you. I'll be done there.
Mm.
The travel thing came up. What do you guys think of that? As a parent, I'm interested. I don't have.
I'll just comment on what the school's kind of guidance is on that. We're not requiring that people not travel, and we are sharing, and I think Wendy in the chat shared a link to a document she put together that just pulled straight from CDC guidance about what types of activities are lower risk versus higher risk, especially around travel and around holiday gatherings. So, as we look ahead to Thanksgiving and the winter holiday, what we've asked is for everyone to just continue to follow the same guidance that we've got right now, which is be really consistent about wearing masks and about keeping physical distance from people who are not in your household, maximizing outdoor air and air circulation, and just taking real care in the kinds of activities that you make. I guess I will, maybe two other things I'll add to that is, well, one is that, you know, we're not able, and we're not really, you know, I don't think it would be good for the school's relationship with our families to be policing that in everyone's family, right? And we're not able to do that. And so we're not going to, you know, dive into your family's personal decisions that happen over the holidays and tell you what to do and what not to do. We are asking that everyone recognize, you know, the kinds of things that we're talking about today, is that what we do, and then when we come back to the school, is affecting the other people around us. And we definitely have people in our community who have underlying health conditions, and you know, for whom the consequences, it's just much more severe for them. And so, you know, our goal is to do the things that help protect those people especially, and to protect everybody. And so, you know, in the decisions that people make, you know, if you find that you're unable to, if you just, you know, if you decide that you can't kind of follow those guidelines in your family gatherings and in your travel, there's a good option for students, which is to work from home. And, you know, we've obviously worked really, really hard to make that possible and to make it feasible for students to have a reasonable school experience for a while. So if, you know, if you've decided, like, I just can't not go give grandma a big hug, you know, then that's great. That's fine. That's a reasonable choice. And we're just asking, be really thoughtful about when you're coming back to the school. And if you want to sort of talk to me about what that might look like, in terms of a time frame or testing when you get back, or, you know, what would make us all feel safe for you to kind of come back to the school, we can have that discussion on a one-on-one basis.
I wanted to add something onto
ahead,
that.
Wendy.
Just that there's just a lot of pieces to it. And so it's all kind of like Kristof was describing, dials that we can tinker with. And so it's like, how many people, how are you traveling? Are the people that you're with, have they been wearing masks and isolating, or have they been, you know, going to football games? And so there's all kinds of factors that we can all just think about, and then decide what's a comfortable level of risk for us, and then be aware of that level of risk when we come back to Griffin, so that we're not sharing our level of risk with everyone else. One of the things that I think is really important for anyone traveling is just to research the rate of COVID transmission. And I shared some links in that document. You know, we have family in El Paso. We would not go to El Paso right now. They're, you know, suffering greatly. And so that's a really important factor that I think all of us can just take a little bit of time to pay attention to.
Let's see, I see some questions and some answers in the chat. Kristof, do you want to speak to paper filter?
Yeah, so some of the cloth masks have a paper filter insert. So it really depends on the geometry of the mask. If it's likely that when you breathe out, some of the breath can go not through the paper filter, it's obviously not going to be as good. But if it's the same material as in one of these, or this is the KN95, one of these, we're good to go. But both of these, I want to talk about something else too. So check this out. Like, this looks like a bird beak, right? It's really sitting out compared to a cloth mask. So what does that mean? Like, from a physics perspective, it means there's a lot more area in there. So imagine I'm like dumping this water glass out, and it's flowing through an area the size of the spoon versus the size of the mask in a certain time period. It's going to go much faster through the spoon because it's bigger. I mean, it's smaller, right? So what I'm getting at is, every time you exhale, if you exhale into a larger mask volume with more area, everything's moving slower. Slower is better for capture efficiency, right? That shouldn't be a surprise. So a nice tight cloth mask the air is just racing through there. So not only is the material like relative to this, it's kind of wide open. Like they did some microscope, electron microscope, no, just regular microscope. And cloth masks look like this, right? They look like waffles. And these squares in my fingers, those are like 5 micrometers, right? So imagine a 2.5 micron particle, seeing one of those, it's just like right in. I think I answered it, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, Kristof shared this New York Times animation of particles moving through a cloth mask and moving through an N95 mask, and I put that link in the chat for people to see. It's pretty cool. It's interesting to look at.
Yeah.
Okay, what are the rules if a sibling goes to another school and there's a case? So our rules are related to, you know, they're consistent with the CDC rules and the Austin Public Health rules, and it's about whether your student who goes to another school is a close contact of the person who was COVID positive. So close contact is defined as that you've been within 6 feet, mask or no mask, doesn't matter if you have a mask on, but if you're within 6 feet for a cumulative amount of time of 15 minutes over the last 24 hours. So that's our rule about it. And again, you know, I guess we're asking everybody to be careful about how they assess. Like, well, I passed by that person. Yeah, I mean, you know, you got to just kind of think through whether you really think you were exposed or not.
On the 6 feet. So
Yeah.
can I make a comment? So the 6 feet obviously came out of the squirt gun model, right? That's how far these droplets go before they hit the floor. In a beautiful coincidence, this plume that we live in is also about 1 meter around us, right? So meaning my particles that I'm emitting are staying within about a plume. So, I mean, 1 meter radius away from me. So again, the 2 meters works for aerosol transmission. So it's definitely effective. What is really important, any of you that are in a building where your employer has said, oh, we're going to put up plexiglass partitions everywhere, that is really based on the squirt gun model, right? Obviously, it's plexiglass. If like someone's vaping, you're not going to go, oh, let me put a piece of plexiglass here. So what happens with the plexiglass is it doesn't let the air in the room mix. So you might have protected yourself, or you might have just created a little, you know, fiefdom inside which all the particles are now stuck. So only if you're in a teller or a direct facing situation repeatedly, like if you guys open your snack bar or something, then, or like the person at the front desk, that's absolutely a place for plexiglass. But generally speaking, in your workplaces, I know a lot of workplaces have put up plexiglass partitions all over the place. That was that distortion that I referred to. And it's really, I mean, I don't want us to lose faith in our public health officials. They're absolutely on their game. They're working night and day to make us safe. They are in fact health officials, and they're coming out of this medical biased perspective. Many of them are not coming from the indoor air quality science perspective. So it's a shame that like on the public health commissions, we don't have more indoor air quality scientists to offer their wisdom, but currently we don't.
Thanks, Kristof. Yeah, and it is just about getting on to 7. I do want to wrap it up. I also just want to say, you know, we're not going anywhere, and we're available for more questions, and we would be happy to you know, host another community meeting if there's an interest in doing that. I guess as we wrap up, I just want to come back to what. Well, first, let me just thank Kristof again, and like maybe you want to put some. Yeah, I know that like the yeah, you can put your applause icon on, or you can say something in the chat. But just Kristof, know that the silence doesn't mean we don't appreciate you. We are so grateful to you for bringing us your expertise.
Back at you.
Yeah. And so I just want to kind of reiterate what Wendy said. I feel like we've taken and as Kristof said, we're in the learning process too. So we're gonna keep looking at what we can do. The thing that we decided we could do next was the new kind of strategy on masks. And I think there will continue to be things that we do going forward. But the goal is to have the kind of layer of strategies that all of them together, bring down the risk for our students and for our staff and for our whole community. And we know there's a limit to what we can do at the school. It will depend a lot on what's happening in the broader community. So as Wendy said, we're going to keep watching that. We know. I guess I just want to say that I really think we know we're in for the long haul on this pandemic, but I guess I would just focus our attention on the next few months. I think we've got 3 months to survive, and if we can survive the winter, it's not like we're home free, right? But if we can survive this winter and be very careful and very we can show a lot of concern for the people around us. In the springtime, we're going to get a lot more outdoor air. It's going to get easier in some ways. And, fingers crossed, we will have some hope with potentially a virus in the pipeline. And again, that might still be months and months away, but I think that right now is the hard part, because it's like there's no glimmer of hope yet about when this is going to end. And I really do trust that in March, there will be, a sense that, hey, we're moving in a certain direction in the world where we can see an end to all of this. So let's just be careful. We've got a winter to be super cautious and careful, and we're going to get to the other side of this, and then we're going to have some hope, and we're going to latch onto that and move on.
Yeah. Thank you, Adam.
Okay, well, thanks to everybody for coming. Really, really appreciate your engagement in this stuff. Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, Kristof, for your leadership.
And yours. Thank you, Adam. And I'm happy to come back, y'all. And I don't have all the answers, but happy to come talk if you have more questions.
Yeah.
Yay.
Okay, bye, everybody.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Niku. Good to see you.